He missed his train. But that moment changed his life forever. This is the story of a young man who almost gave up, not because he wasn't good enough, but because the world decided too early what box he belonged in. He didn't grow up with power or privilege or last names that opened doors. All he had was grit, decency, and the kind of faith that hurts to hold on to when nothing's working. But one decision, one act of kindness in a train station full of strangers, changed everything. Before we begin this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The argument started near gate 6, the kind of small, ugly moment people pretend not to see. Mike heard it before he saw it. A woman's trembling voice, a guard's sharp reply, and that sharp silence that falls when the world quietly decides who's worth protecting. He turned, spotting her, a black mother, maybe late 20s, clutching a stroller, 2 officers closing in. Her baby fussed softly while she rummaged through her bag with frantic, shaking hands. "Ma'am," one officer said, voice clipped, "if you can't produce proof of payment, you'll have to step aside." It was Philadelphia's 30th Street station, marble echoing with footsteps, the smell of coffee and cold air drifting through steel beams. Commuters rushed past, eyes fixed straight ahead. Nobody wanted to see it. Mike did. He'd seen it too many times before, the quiet humiliation that comes with being questioned first, believed last. He glanced at the clock. 9:13, his train left in 7 minutes. If he missed it, that was it, no do-over, no next time. This interview in New York wasn't just another job, it was the first real shot he'd had since his father died 2 years ago. He'd taken care of his mother since then, juggling side work, fixing pipes and wiring until his savings vanished. When Stanton and Blake, one of the biggest engineering firms in the country, agreed to give him a late-stage interview, he'd sold his old laptop just to afford the train ticket. He could hear his mom's voice in his head that morning, "Don't you dare come back here talking about bad luck again, Michael. You show them who you are." He adjusted his tie, the same one he wore to his father's funeral, and told himself to keep walking. Just get to the train. Then he heard the woman whisper, voice breaking, "Please, it's in my bag, I swear." Mike froze. Something about the tremor in her voice cracked open that small, quiet part of him that still believed in doing what's right, even when it costs you. "Excuse me," he said, stepping forward. "She's not lying. I saw her at the kiosk earlier, she paid." The taller officer turned, expression flat. "Do you work here, sir?" "No," Mike said. "Then please don't interfere." The word stung. Interfere. As if decency was an inconvenience. He pulled out his debit card, the one he prayed wouldn't decline. "I'll buy her another ticket. Right now." The guard's eyes flickered, part annoyance, part surprise. "That's not necessary." "It is to me," Mike said and slid his card through the machine. The woman's eyes filled. "God bless you," she whispered, clutching the stroller. He nodded once, forced a smile, and turned for the platform. Then came the announcement, "Final call for train 221 to New York City." He ran. Art. Suitcase in one hand, ticket in the other. The whistle screamed, the doors hissed shut. "Wait," he yelled, waving. But the conductor only shook his head, sympathetic but unmoved. The train pulled away, wind rushing past his face. He stood there for a long moment, chest burning, the metallic tang of regret heavy on his tongue. The next train wouldn't come for 2 hours. The interview he'd been chasing for months, gone. He sank onto a bench, elbows on his knees. Maybe he'd done the right thing. Maybe right didn't matter when you were broke. His phone buzzed, a message from his mother, "You on the train yet?" He stared at it and didn't reply. Then he heard a voice behind him. "You all right there, son?" Mike looked up. An older white man stood nearby, navy suit, polished shoes, a briefcase that looked older than Mike. "Missed my train," Mike said, trying to laugh it off. The man studied him. "Where were you headed?" "New York. Job interview." "Important one, I take it?" Mike nodded. "Maybe the only one that ever mattered." The man smiled faintly. "Sometimes missing a train don't mean missing your stop." Mike chuckled. "Feels like it does today." "Where's the interview?" Mike told him. The man's eyes lit up with something between surprise and recognition. "Well, I'll be damned," he said softly. "I co-founded that company 27 years ago." Mike blinked. "You what?" The man held out his hand. "Arthur Reynolds. Retired partner." Mike froze, words slipping away. Arthur smiled. "Send me your resume tonight. I'll make sure it reaches the right people. You've got character, son. That still counts for something in my world." Before Mike could find words, the man's train arrived. He handed over a sleek business card and stepped aboard. Sometimes the right train comes after the wrong one leaves. The doors slid shut. Mike stared at the card. The name engraved in silver letters shimmered like a promise he didn't trust himself to believe. He let out a shaky laugh. Maybe the universe wasn't done with him yet. Maybe missing that train wasn't punishment, it was preparation. But life has a way of testing blessings before it hands them over. And somewhere between that empty platform and the hope sitting in his pocket, Mike Lawson was about to learn that integrity can open doors, but it can also draw enemies. The email came 3 days later, short, polite, and life-altering. Subject: Let's talk, recommendation from Mr. Reynolds. Mike read it 3 times, afraid that if he blinked, the words might disappear. The sender's name, Emily Carr, Talent Acquisition Director, Stanton and Blake Engineering, looked unreal on his cracked phone screen. 4 years, that name had existed on rejection emails, cold, polite paragraphs thanking him for his interest. Now it was a door swinging back open. He sat in his small apartment in West Philly, walls still smelling faintly of paint and poverty, the sound of the radiator clicking like an old heart that refused to quit. His mother was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she packed sandwiches for her nursing shift. "You smiling at that phone like it just told you you're rich," she said. Mike laughed under his breath. "Might as well have. Got a call back, from Stanton and Blake." She froze mid-motion. "The one you prayed about?" "The one," he said softly. Her smile faltered. "You know what they're like up there. Don't go thinking people change just because they say nice things in emails." "I know, Ma. I just need a chance." She wiped her hands on a towel and came closer, placing one palm on his cheek. "Then walk in there like you belong. 'Cause you do." That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman at the train station, her tears mixing with the hiss of departing brakes. Maybe this was the universe's way of saying it hadn't forgotten. By morning he was up before dawn, tying the same navy tie he'd worn 3 days ago. The mirror in his bathroom was cracked, one line running right through his reflection, like a scar dividing the man he was from the one he hoped to become. The train to New York was quiet, filled with early commuters lost in their phones. He watched the blur of city outskirts give way to fields and highways, every passing mile a heartbeat closer to redemption. When he arrived at the Stanton and Blake building, all glass, marble, and ambition, his breath caught. The place looked like success had a physical address. The receptionist barely looked up when he introduced himself. 27th floor, she said. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft hum of music. He could see his reflection in the mirror panel, tense shoulders, clenched jaw, determination buried beneath fatigue. When the doors opened, a tall woman in a gray suit was waiting. "Mike Lawson?" "Yes, ma'am." "Emily Carr," she said, shaking his hand. "Mr. Reynolds speaks highly of you." He tried to steady his voice. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." "Follow me," she said, walking briskly down a glass corridor. "We'll start with a conversation before you meet the review panel." The office was bright, sleek, and cold. The kind of place where silence had power. Emily gestured for him to sit. "I've gone through your file," she said. "You're not the usual applicant. Most of our hires come from Ivy programs or private networks. But Mr. Reynolds's word carries weight." Mike nodded. "I understand." "Good," she said, glancing up from her screen. "Tell me what integrity means to you." He blinked, caught off guard. "Integrity?" "Yes. Everyone talks about skill. I want to know about character." He took a slow breath. "Integrity means doing the right thing when it doesn't pay off. When nobody's watching. When it costs you something, and you do it anyway." Her eyes lingered on him for a beat longer than expected. Then she smiled faintly. "Interesting answer." The door opened behind them. 3 people entered, 2 men in dark suits and 1 woman with a clipboard. "This is our review panel," Emily said smoothly. "They'll take it from here." She stood, gave Mike a small nod, and stepped out. The panel sat across from him. Their questions came sharp and quick, about engineering processes, crisis management, leadership under pressure. Mike held his ground, his answers steady. He could feel the rhythm shift. They were testing more than knowledge, they were testing if he belonged. Then one of the men leaned back, voice deceptively casual. "So, Mike, where'd you say you studied again?" "Temple University, sir." A raised eyebrow. "Not Ivy then?" "No, sir. But I graduated top 5%. Another pause, that quiet, polite smile that carried its own insult. "Impressive. Must have been quite the challenge." He knew what that meant. He'd heard it before, The kind of backhanded compliment people gave when they couldn't say what they really thought. He kept his tone even. It was. But challenge builds grit. The man nodded slowly. We'll keep that in mind. The interview stretched past an hour. When it ended, Emily reappeared, her expression unreadable. You handled yourself well, she said. Thank you, he replied, standing. His palms were damp, his pulse thundering. Do you think I have a chance? Her lips curved just slightly. We'll be in touch. He rode the elevator down, body buzzing with adrenaline and uncertainty. Outside, the city air hit him, sharp, electric. He wanted to believe it had gone well, but something in her tone felt like an ellipsis instead of a period. At Penn Station, he bought a coffee he couldn't afford and sat near the glass windows watching trains come and go. He thought of his mother's words, "You walking into a world that wasn't built for you, baby." His phone buzzed again. A known number. He hesitated, then answered. This is Mike. A familiar voice came through, steady, warm. Lawson, this is Arthur Reynolds. Mike straightened. Sir. I wanted to thank you for. No need, Reynolds said. I just got a note from Carr. She says you impressed them. Mike's heart kicked. That's good to hear. It is. But listen carefully, she also mentioned something that didn't sit right. Said one of the panelists questioned your background a little too hard. I don't like that. Mike swallowed. I'm used to it, sir. Shouldn't have to be, Reynolds muttered. Let me make a few calls. The line clicked. Mike stared at his reflection in the train window, his own tired face looking back. For the first time in years he felt the impossible mix of hope and dread. He didn't know that what Reynolds was about to do, that one call, would ignite a storm that reached far beyond the interview room. Because sometimes when you open a door for someone the world tried to shut out, the people guarding that door start to panic. And for Mike Lawson, the next train ride wasn't toward a job offer. It was toward a test of everything he believed about fairness, dignity, and what doing the right thing really cost. Mike sat at the edge of his bed, tie still knotted from the interview, fingers locked together. The morning sunlight poured through the blinds in thin, golden stripes. His mother's gospel playlist hummed from the kitchen, but for once it didn't reach him. He'd done everything right, arrived early, spoke clearly, smiled through every subtle jab. Yet deep down he'd known from their eyes the moment he walked in, they weren't planning to hire him. He kept replaying it in his mind. The way the panelists looked at each other when he mentioned his volunteer work in West Philly. The way the youngest one smirked when he said his father had been a mechanic. The word impressive had never sounded so condescending. He could take rejection, he'd had plenty, but not this kind. Not the kind that came wrapped in polite language and invisible walls. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Reynolds. Keep your chin up, son. Right people notice the right things. Mike sighed. He didn't know what that meant anymore. Maybe Reynolds was just being kind. Maybe he was trying to ease the sting. Either way, kindness didn't pay rent. He grabbed his jacket and left the house, needing air. The streets near the train station were alive with noise, buses sighing at stops, vendors shouting prices, the low hum of morning commuters. Mike ducked into a small corner cafe near the 30th Street entrance, one of those old places with scratched tables and the smell of burnt espresso hanging in the air. He ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, black coffee, no sugar, and sat by the window staring at the crowd outside. His reflection looked back at him in the glass, tired eyes, the faint shadow of stubble, and a suit that no longer fit his dreams. Across the room, a man in a gray coat dropped his cup. Coffee splashed across the floor, dark liquid running toward Mike's shoes. The barista groaned, grabbing paper towels. Mike stood up without thinking. I got it. He crouched beside the man, helping him collect the shards of porcelain. The stranger was older, maybe late 50s, and clearly embarrassed. I'm so sorry, he muttered. It's fine, Mike said, smiling slightly. Happens to all of us. As they cleaned, the man squinted at him. You were at Stanton and Blake this morning, weren't you? Mike froze. Yeah. How'd you know? The man smiled faintly. Because I was there too. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of milk frothing behind the counter filled the silence. Mike straightened slowly, unsure what to say. I'm with a contractor that consults for them, the man said. I was in the lobby waiting for a meeting when I saw you walk in. You looked nervous, but you also looked like the only one who belonged there for the right reasons. Mike blinked. That's not how it felt inside. The man nodded. I bet it didn't. They sat down at the same table, steam curling from fresh mugs of coffee. The man extended his hand. Harold Westbrook. Mike, he said, shaking it. Harold studied him for a long moment. Let me guess. Degree in civil engineering, probably top of your class, but can't seem to get anyone to take a chance on you? Mike let out a hollow laugh. That obvious? Obvious, Harold said, and familiar. He leaned back, eyes thoughtful. I grew up in South Carolina in the 60s. My dad was a welder. I know that look, the one you've got now. It's the look of someone who's been told, maybe next time, one too many times. Mike said nothing. The words sat between them, heavy and true. Then Harold's voice softened. But I also know something else. How quickly tables turn when one person decides to open the right door. Mike frowned. You saying you can help me? Harold smiled a little. I'm saying I'd like to. They talked for nearly an hour, about school, community projects, the kind of design work Mike dreamed of doing. Harold listened like few people ever had. Then, as Mike finished describing a flood control system he'd helped design for a neighborhood park, Harold said, You mind showing me that design? Mike hesitated. Now. Why not? Mike opened his laptop, scrolling through old files until the blueprints appeared, clean, precise lines and annotations showing how he'd redirected water runoff to prevent flooding. Harold leaned in, impressed. You did this yourself? With a volunteer team. City said they couldn't fund the repairs, so we built it with leftover materials. Harold let out a low whistle. That's not just smart. That's leadership. He closed the laptop gently. Listen. I shouldn't tell you this, but Stanton and Blake isn't the only firm in town. My company, Westbrook Infrastructure Group, we're smaller, but we believe in hiring people who solve problems instead of selling presentations. Mike blinked, unsure he'd heard right. You're offering me a job? Harold smiled. I'm offering you a chance to prove you deserve one. The next week, Mike found himself standing in a construction yard outside Camden. Steel beams, blueprints, and men shouting over the roar of machines. The cold bit at his fingers, but he didn't care. Harold had asked him to shadow one of their project teams, just to see how he worked under pressure. By noon he was waist-deep in calculations, helping an older foreman fix a layout error that would have delayed the entire foundation pour. The man clapped him on the shoulder afterward. You saved us a full day. Didn't think the new kid had it in him. When Harold arrived later that afternoon, he saw the commotion, grinned, and pulled Mike aside. I heard you just saved my project from becoming a very expensive mistake. Mike shrugged, trying to hide his smile. Just doing what needed to be done. That's exactly why I'm glad you missed that train, Harold said. You belong here. Mike blinked. Here? Harold handed him a folded letter. Official offer. Junior engineer. Starts Monday. For a moment, Mike couldn't speak. His throat felt tight. Mr. Westbrook, he managed, I don't even know what to say. Say you'll show up, Harold said. And say you'll keep proving people wrong the same way you did today. That night, Mike sat outside the station again, the same spot where everything had started, where he'd missed his train, thought his life was over, and unknowingly set the next chapter in motion. He could still see the ghost of that moment, the crying baby, the officers, the rain-slick marble floor. If he'd walked away that day, if he'd looked down and kept walking, none of this would have happened. Sometimes, he thought, the universe didn't punish you for doing the right thing. It just made you wait a little longer to see why it mattered. As the last train of the night rolled past, its windows glowing gold in the dark, Mike smiled faintly to himself. He hadn't missed his train after all. He'd just been on a different track. The first day Mike walked into Westbrook Infrastructure as a full-time employee, it didn't feel real. The badge hanging around his neck had his name printed in bold, the kind of bold he'd only ever seen on rejection letters. He'd come a long way from that station platform, from near misses and sleepless nights and a dream that always felt one door out of reach. Now he had a desk, a title, junior structural engineer, and a seat at a table he once thought he'd never reach. Harold, true to his word, had become more than a mentor. He was the kind of boss who believed in people, who looked past where you came from and saw what you could build. This company runs on teamwork, he'd said. You make others better, you stay. Mike tried to live by that. But not everyone liked it. By the second month, the whispers had started. The team was made up of seasoned engineers, most of them older, all of them tight-knit. They weren't bad people, just people who didn't like being reminded that someone new, someone young and different was already turning heads. Little things began happening. His project files went missing from the shared drive. His name was left off email threads. Once, a faulty measurement appeared on a site report, under his initials. When he confronted one of the technicians, the man only smirked. Maybe you just made a mistake, rookie. Happens to the best of us. Mike didn't argue. He fixed it quietly, double-checked his work, and moved on. But the pattern grew. One afternoon, during a major client presentation, his prototype model was switched with an outdated version. The error cost the firm a shot at a smaller contract, and though Harold defended him, the embarrassment lingered. That night, Mike sat alone at his desk long after everyone had gone, the office lights flickering low. He stared at the computer screen, jaw tight. He'd done everything right, worked twice as hard, kept his head down, and still, somehow, he was being dragged into the mud. But then he thought about his mother's words before that first interview. You walking into a world that wasn't built for you. Just remember who you are in that room. He exhaled, slow and steady. No, he wasn't quitting. Not now. The next morning, Harold stopped by his desk. Got a minute? Mike followed him to the conference room. Spread across the table were blueprints and contracts stamped confidential. Harold leaned on the table. We've been invited to bid for the Cross River project, the biggest urban redevelopment plan this state's seen in years. Government-backed. Multi-million-dollar scope. Mike's eyes widened. That's huge. It is, Harold said. And I want you on the team. Mike hesitated. Are you sure? After everything? Harold smiled faintly. I didn't hire you for comfort, son. I hired you for results. And I know talent when I see it. For the first time in weeks, Mike felt a flicker of pride, quiet but real. The next month became a blur. Late nights, design revisions, stress tests, simulations. Mike poured everything he had into the Cross River proposal, not for glory but because it mattered. The project wasn't just steel and concrete. It would reshape entire communities, reconnecting neighborhoods long divided by neglect. And somewhere between exhaustion and hope, he began to win people over, slowly, piece by piece. His data was clean, his math tight, his ideas bold but practical. Even the skeptics on the team began taking notes during his briefings. Then, 3 days before submission, it happened again. An internal audit flagged discrepancies in the design schematics, missing cost breakdowns, altered dimensions. It looked bad. Very bad. And somehow, every edit was traced to Mike's account. The department went silent. Eyes turned. Jacobs, who'd quietly returned from administrative leave months earlier, leaned against the doorframe, watching. Looks like your golden boy's not so flawless after all, he said. Harold's face was unreadable. Mike. I didn't touch those files, Mike said, voice low but firm. Somebody used my login. Do you have proof? Not yet. The meeting ended with tension thick enough to slice. Mike spent that night at the office. He combed through access logs, comparing timestamps, searching for any trace of tampering. Nothing. Whoever did it covered their tracks well. By 3 a.m. he was slumped in his chair, eyes burning. He almost gave up, until he remembered something. The company's file server auto-synced backups every 24 hours. If someone had altered the files, the system would have stored a shadow copy. He dug through the archives. Line after line of encrypted data, until, finally, he found it. A backup timestamped 2:14 a.m. the night before, and the username attached wasn't his. It was one of his colleagues. The same one who'd mocked him weeks ago. He stared at the screen, a slow disbelief flooding his chest. They'd tried to set him up. He didn't storm into Harold's office or make a scene. Instead, he quietly compiled everything, the logs, the copies, even the security footage from that night, and saved it all to a single flash drive. Then he went home, slept for 2 hours, and showed up the next morning like nothing was wrong. When the executives gathered for the final pre-submission review, Mike waited until Jacobs started his usual performance. Subtle digs, fake politeness, before he spoke. There's something I need to show, Mike said, plugging the flash drive into the projector. The room dimmed. The screen lit up. First came the server logs. Then the timestamps. Then, the footage, 2 employees accessing his station after hours, one of them laughing as he opened Mike's folder. Gasps filled the room. The silence that followed was heavy, like a held breath. Jacobs went pale. Harold turned to the board. Gentlemen, I think we've seen enough. Within days, an internal review was launched. The culprits, 2 senior engineers, were dismissed. Jacobs resigned before his own hearing could begin. But what mattered most wasn't revenge. It was the respect that followed. People who'd once doubted Mike began to greet him differently, not just with politeness but with recognition. A week later, the Cross River proposal was submitted, clean, airtight, visionary. The city council approved it unanimously. It was the biggest win in Westbrook's history. Harold called Mike into his office again. This time there was no tension, just quiet pride. You saved this company, he said. Mike shook his head. I just did my job. Harold smiled. Maybe. But you also reminded this place what integrity looks like. He handed him an envelope. Inside, a new contract, with a new title. Project Lead, Cross River Division. Mike stared at it. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Harold said simply. You've earned it. On the day the Cross River groundbreaking was announced, Mike stood before the cameras, wearing the same suit he'd worn to that first interview, the one his mother said made him look like someone the world might finally listen to. And now they were listening. Reporters asked about his journey, the setbacks, the rumors. He smiled, calm and sure. I've learned that doing the right thing doesn't always make you popular, he said. But in the end, truth has a way of surviving everything else. He paused, scanning the crowd, construction workers, city officials, families watching from the street. This project isn't just about steel and concrete. It's about second chances. About what happens when good people refuse to let others' bitterness define them. The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was steady, the kind that grows slowly and doesn't fade. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the cranes, Mike sat on a bench near the river, watching the water catch the light. Harold joined him quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. You know, Harold said, I almost didn't take that train that day. Funny how the smallest things can rewrite your story. Mike smiled. I almost missed mine. They sat in companionable silence, the city humming around them. No grand speeches, no cameras, just 2 men who had found faith again in the idea that honesty still mattered. Whatever you do next, Harold said, keep that fire. The world needs it. Mike nodded, eyes on the skyline. I plan to. Later, as he packed up his tools, a group of new interns passed by, young, eager, hopeful. One of them stopped and said, Sir, we've read about what you did here. You make it feel like maybe good people still win. He laughed softly. We don't always win, he said. But we don't have to lose who we are to get ahead. That's the real victory. And as the lights of the city shimmered across the river, Mike walked away, not triumphant, not untouchable, but whole. Because sometimes justice isn't about punishment. Sometimes it's about endurance. About light refusing to dim even when the room grows darker. If this story touched you, don't just scroll past. Share it. Let someone else remember that integrity still has a place in the world. Hit like if you believe in second chances, and subscribe for more stories that remind us that being good still pays, even if it takes time. Because maybe, just maybe, that's how the world changes, one act of courage at a time.